Hello and welcome. Let's take a look at our big story this hour. People in Iran continue to protest despite an ultimatum from the Revolutionary Guards. The top commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guards had said that the 29th of October would be their last day of carrying out demonstrations. But defying the harshest warning by the Iranian authorities so far, students gathered across Iran. The security forces fired tear gas and gunshots in an attempt to disperse the students. Meanwhile, protesters chanted freedom and "I don't want the Islamic Republic" in an act of defiance. The protests are currently in its seventh week. They were triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody. She died on the 16th of September. This has caused large-scale demonstrations across the country. Security forces have struggled to contain the growing protests in the country. Rights groups said that over 160 people have been killed in the clashes so far. This includes more than 24 children. Hundreds have been detained by authorities. Over 300 journalists and photojournalists signed a statement to condemn the authorities for violating their civil rights. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities have continued to maintain that these protests are being triggered by foreign enemies. The protests have attracted global attention. It has also led to solidarity demonstrations in cities all over the world. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Lynn O'Donnell, who is a journalist from London. Thank you for being with us, Lynn. How do you see the situation in Iran as the protests continue, despite the government warning the protesters to stop?
Hi, Alison. Thanks for having me. It seems like the more the authorities threaten the people who are coming out on the street to demonstrate, the more entrenched they become in their determination to continue their demonstrations. I was watching Iran international television over the weekend and seeing extraordinary scenes of demonstrations only by young men who were taking on the police and the armed authorities. The police all over the country are trying to quell demonstrations with live fire, firing into crowds in some places, but there doesn't seem to be any indication that the demonstrators are dissipating or that their fervour is coming under control, that they have any intention of stopping their protests. Now they're calling for the overthrow of the regime, and they seem to also have garnered the support of some international figures. Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, Michelle Obama has been tweeting, and of course this feeds into, as you were saying, the claims by the regime that the protests are being stirred up. But it has been quite the other way. The protests started, and now the international support is growing.
Right. On that, then, as the global support swells for the Iranian protesters, how do you react to the Iranian government's charge that the Western nations are fanning these protests?
Well, as I said, it started the other way round. Women started going onto the street to protest the death in detention of Mahsa Amini. And it grew and grew, and now we're in the 45th day, and it shows no sign of dissipating. Now, reasonable people who live in democratic, free societies can look at and have looked for more than 40 years at the Iranian form of governance and seen that women have been very poorly treated, and that the mandatory headscarves and the roaming of the streets of so-called virtue police has really, it's what is regarded outside in Western-style democracies as oppressive. And so support for people who are calling for freedoms that you and I take for granted can only grow. Yes, it feeds into what the regime would like to say is the backing of outside forces. America and Israel were mentioned early on. But as I say, it's gone the other way round, and it's only growing. Now, the enthusiasm that young Iranians have, and it's not only young Iranians anymore, we might add, for their calls for freedom and the overthrow of the theocratic regime will only garner more support from outside, and then it feeds the beast. It becomes maybe a self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's see where we go.
Right. And do you think that the Iran hijab protest shows the limits of people power, given just how hard the regime is clamping down?
Oh, not yet. No, I think limits of people power will be met when the protesters go home and stop protesting. We're seeing a doubling down by people. We're looking at oil workers going on strike for better conditions. Some teachers are also protesting for better pay and conditions, and also encouraging in some pockets of society the students to join in the demonstrations. On social media, we're seeing segregation walls in dining halls, in universities, for instance, being ripped down. We're not seeing any slowdown. It's been, as you said, 6 weeks. And I think people power has been shown over the past 20, 30 years to be able to overthrow regimes if it becomes strong enough. Where there's a will, there's a way. Let's see what limits we can reach, but we're certainly not there yet.
Right. Then thank you very much for being with us on this broadcast and your valuable analysis.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.